Hello, everybody. Welcome back to It's Called Football as we bring you the recap of what happened in Matchday 19 of the Premier League. We have now hit the halfway point of the league season in England, and let's get straight into the details. So, we saw five games take place across Tuesday. Newcastle started off by welcoming Nottingham Forest. Bournemouth then hosted Fulham. Sheffield United went head to head against Luton Town in a big match for both teams, considering that they're both stuck in the bottom three, and a win for either would be huge for both momentum and for their hopes of getting out of those lowest three spots in the league table. Burnley, who are the third team in those bottom three, they hosted Liverpool, who are fighting to be at the top of the league table, not just this week, but also by the end of the season. They're a definite contender for the league title. And this was a great opportunity for Liverpool to try and pick up points where their rivals had tough games. Speaking of their title rivals, Aston Villa had a tough trip to Manchester United on the cards, where United generally have not been consistent with their form, but are always a threat at home. Nottingham Forest actually pulled off a huge shock, beating Newcastle United at their own home by a score of 3 goals to 1. Bournemouth had a very routine performance as they cruised to yet another win, 3-0 against Fulham. That means Bournemouth are now unbeaten in their last 7 league games, which is fantastic for them. Great turnaround after their poor start to the season. And Bournemouth now look a very difficult fixture for anyone, whether it's home or away. It's just unfortunate that they didn't start the season like this because they would have been comfortably in the top half of the table had they done so. Luton Town edged a thriller against Sheffield United, coming out on top by 3 goals to 2, while Liverpool, as was probably expected based on the strength on paper between the two teams, Liverpool had a 2-0 victory over Burnley. They made harder work of it than they probably should have, but they won't mind that as long as they've got the 3 points at the end of it. And Manchester United actually had a thriller as well. They fell down by 2 goals against Aston Villa and then came out to win the game 3-2 with goals from Garnacho and Højlund. Wednesday saw three more fixtures played, with Thursday bringing around the final two. Brentford went up against Wolves. The two teams are right near each other around mid-table in the league right now. Chelsea and Crystal Palace, both teams who have struggled for form at times, but Chelsea at their own home probably had the edge in this game going into it, and Chelsea have looked kind of a better side overall, just about, than Crystal Palace. Everton, after going on a 4 game win streak, saw that come to an end against Tottenham, and there's no rest for them because they then welcome Manchester City, fresh off winning the Club World Cup. Thursday's fixtures, like we said, saw two potential thrillers, with Brighton hosting Tottenham, both teams near each other in kind of the range of fourth to eighth, and Arsenal looking to stay at the top of the table as they welcomed London rival West Ham to town. Wolves put an end to their away record, which has been quite dismal over the last few trips they've made out of their own home. They had a resounding 4-1 win against Brentford, who are weirdly struggling on their own patch this season, which was almost never happening last year. Chelsea came out just about on top. They needed a late penalty kick to edge past Crystal Palace 2-1, while Manchester City, initially having fallen behind to Everton, turned it around and in the end saw a pretty comfortable victory out 3-1. Brighton had a thrilling game against Tottenham. They actually went 4-0 up before Tottenham pulled back two late goals that ultimately proved to be nothing more than consolation, while West Ham United put on a fantastic defensive display away to Arsenal, who just didn't seem to have that attacking edge on them today. Their forwards all seem to be struggling a little bit for form in terms of finding the net, and West Ham ultimately defended well, found it fairly easy, if I'm honest, and they were clinical enough. Two shots on target from West Ham and two goals. Uh, there's no denying that they deserved the win here. Arsenal were poor on the day, and they ultimately didn't deserve anything from the game. So we'll look at the league table as we complete matchday 19. Liverpool have now taken the lead in the race for the league title. They are 2 points clear of Arsenal at the moment, uh, with 42 points to Arsenal's 40, due to Arsenal losing their third game of the season and Liverpool managing to beat Burnley away. Aston Villa's defeat at the hands of Manchester United means that Villa remain in third place, given that they had enough of uh, breathing space on the teams below them, but not quite enough to edge the teams above them. And Manchester United, as a result of their win, have now gone up to seventh place. Manchester City getting their victory against Everton, combined with Tottenham's defeat at the hands of Brighton, means that City now edge Tottenham in the league table. Reminder as well that Manchester City also have a game in hand still to be played against Brentford. Tottenham obviously have just dropped to 1 point below City, but obviously when the points gap is so small, anything can change in a week. And as we've seen, none of the top teams are really consistent for form right now. It's not like anybody's stringing together 5, 6, 7 wins in a row. West Ham, however, have been doing quite well, and they maintain their chase in the top half of the table. They remain above Newcastle, Manchester United, and Brighton, just as they were going into matchday 19. And West Ham are now within touching distance of overtaking Tottenham in the table, should Spurs slip up again. Manchester United and Brighton both move up, both having picked up wins this week, with Newcastle's surprise defeat, meaning that they now drop down to ninth place. They still can't be caught at the moment by 10th place Chelsea, but Newcastle will be concerned because they have now lost 8 games this season, which is three more than they lost in the entirety of last season's league campaign. Chelsea picking up a win that was expected but hard fought in the end against Crystal Palace means that they maintain their position in 10th place. There are teams tied with them right now on points, but Chelsea's goal difference means that they remain in the top half at the moment. As we said, Wolves and Bournemouth are the two teams that are currently tied with points, with Chelsea's point tally, sorry. But their goal difference means that at the moment there's a sizable gap that needs to be made up there. However, both teams obviously have done very well with huge margins of victory, both winning by 3 goals in this week's games. And it has to be remembered that Bournemouth do have a game in hand, the one against Luton that was suspended at the time when it was played a couple of match days ago. Fulham slipped to their 10th defeat, obviously, against Bournemouth, and now that points gap between Fulham and the few teams above them grows wider. Fulham, who had a very good run of games at the start of December, have kind of trailed off at the time being right now. Brentford, obviously, slipping to their own defeat against Wolves means that they missed the chance to climb up the table a little bit. And Crystal Palace's defeat keeps them in 15th as well. The only teams in the bottom half that actually uh, changed places at all is Nottingham Forest and Everton. Everton's defeat to Man City, while not necessarily unexpected, means that they have now had two defeats in a row, um, understandably against tough teams, but Nottingham Forest managing to get a surprise win away to a tough team means that at the moment they have put just a little more gap between themselves and that bottom three. Not anything major, but enough to keep their morale up. Luton Town beating Sheffield United was huge because now they have enough of a points gap on both Burnley and Sheffield United, uh, which basically guarantees that Luton at the moment cannot drop below 18th for the time being, as long as they kind of keep up their form. And again, Luton do have a game in hand against Bournemouth that still needs to be played. And should they win that, they would immediately jump up to at least 16th, if not higher. Depends on the margins of victory, obviously. Burnley, of course, remain where they are right now. They are ahead by 2 points on Sheffield United, but should Burnley lose one and Sheffield United win one, it would mean that Burnley drop down to last place in the league table, which is kind of where those two teams have both been for the majority of this campaign. So, some of the key moments that occurred over matchday 19. Chris Wood of Nottingham Forest. He actually was a Newcastle player for some time, and during his entire 18 appearances that he made for Newcastle, he scored 2 goals for them. So it was a bit of a personal game for him here, coming back to Newcastle with his new club, Forest, and he rose to the occasion, scoring all 3 goals for Nottingham Forest after they fell behind to a Newcastle goal. He was the one that responded, putting on a terrific individual display, and his hat trick ultimately got them all 3 points. Luton Town's match with Sheffield United was very back and forth, as I think a lot of seasoned viewers of the league might have expected going into this. Both teams have had this unwanted ability to concede goals quite regularly this season, and they haven't quite found it easy going to score as much. Luton Town's probably had the better chances and the better ability to score and create goals, which is basically what ended up happening here. Luton did go ahead. Sheffield United turned it around to 2-1 up. And then, in typical fashion of two teams that are fighting at the bottom of the table, Luton Town didn't actually have another shot on target after falling behind 2-1. And yet they came back from behind to win the game 3-2, courtesy of 2 own goals by Sheffield United. If there's anything that is more befitting a clash of two teams fighting at the foot of the table, I'd be very happy if you can show it to me. Rasmus Højlund is a young striker who was purchased for around £72 million by Manchester United in the summer. He scored a little bit for United in the Champions League, which ultimately was a disastrous campaign where they went out in the group stage. But he was still looking for his league goal, and there was no better time for it to show up than right here in their game against Aston Villa when they were 2-0 down. It was brought back to 2-2, and none other than Rasmus Højlund scored the winner that put them up 3-2 and ultimately gave them the victory. So it was perhaps worth the wait for United fans, but they'll be hoping, obviously, that this gets him more confident in the Premier League and leads to more goals from him because he had no goals or assists up to this point. Now he's finally off the mark. It was a big moment for him. Huang Hee-chan for Wolves has been another figure that's really gotten a lot of attention this season. He wasn't exactly a prolific goal scorer until now for Wolves. But with the 2 that he picked up against Brentford, he has now hit 10 goals in this league campaign, which is a great tally to have at the halfway point. Very encouraging for Wolves, who have defied expectations up until now. A lot of people, myself included, honestly, expected that Wolves might be stuck in a little bit of a clash and relegation battle at the bottom of the table. But at the moment, there is a very comfortable gap between them and the bottom 3, 4, 5 teams. They will be hoping that that gap continues to increase because the quality that Wolves have shown so far this campaign has been epitomized by Huang Hee-chen, who has continued to fight for them despite having spells of poor form here and there. He's always bounced back. Good to see him on 10 goals so far, and hopefully that form continues. And Manchester City showed that just because they were away for a couple of weeks and had to travel does not mean they're any less lethal and does not mean at all that they're not still in this title race. Uh, Goals from Phil Foden, pictured on the right there, and Julian Alvarez made sure that City were 2-1 up before Bernardo Silva put the seal on the victory later on in the game against Everton. But City are showing everyone they're back, and it doesn't matter that they have some key players injured. They are still very, very much the team to beat for anybody that has designs on the league title this season. It's uh, it's particularly encouraging for City that they're only 5 points at the moment off top spot. They have the best goal difference in the league still right now, and they have a game in hand against Brentford. Should they win that, they will be 2 points off the top, which is kind of expected right now for City. And they are known for coming into form and clicking into gear in the second half of the season, which is when they've gone on famous 15, 16 game winning runs. And should they do that, it's very unlikely to see anybody other than Manchester City winning the league title. Although credit to the teams above them who have pushed so far and do remain above them for now at least. So there are a lot of London teams. It is the most represented city at the moment in the Premier League, and we thought that at this halfway point it might be interesting to look at how these teams are doing, starting with Brentford. Last season, Brentford only lost one game at home, but this time they seem to be very different, and it seems suddenly that it doesn't matter whether it's home or away. Brentford are just not clicking. Now they have had injuries, so let's not take that away. That affects a team very, very much. If you have your first choice 11 and different players in that preferred lineup continue to be injured, it's very hard to get some chemistry together and go on a run of games without defeat because you're constantly having to adjust to different teammates, different play styles, and so on. Brentford, however, in their last 7 games, have had 6 defeats, with their only win coming against Luton Town, sitting in 18th place in the league. That is concerning no matter what the situation is, because Brentford have faced teams in there that they should have beaten or at least taken draws from. Now, to be fair, Brentford have faced teams like Aston Villa, Liverpool, Arsenal, the current top three. They've faced them all in this last 7 game run. But they've also faced Sheffield United, who they really should be beating right now, given how Sheffield United play. So it is a concern for Brentford, and it might not exactly be the most encouraging thing that the extra game they still have to play is against current champions Manchester City, who sit in fourth place in the league. So there, there's understandable concern from Brentford fans, I'm sure, right now, and we will have to see what happens. Tottenham is another strange side to try and assess right now because they're sitting in a healthy position. Fifth place right now in the league table is not anything to sniff at. Uh, and they have had lots of injuries, which kind of derailed their good form at a certain point in the campaign. The bigger concern is they have a lot of players uh, who are going to be taking part in international competitions that happen in January. There's the Asian Cup, where Tottenham's captain, Heung-min Son, is definitely going to be taking part, given that he is the captain of the Korea Republic. And then they've got the African Cup of Nations that takes place in January as well, where they will lose a certain contingent of their squad to that. And then you've got other problems like Christian Romero, probably their best defender right now. He has been sidelined for 4 to 5 weeks with a hamstring problem. And so there is this concern right now that a lack of squad depth combined with players away for international competitions could lead to Tottenham slipping up a little bit more than they currently have. Remember, they did have a run of 4 defeats out of their last 5 games, which is still going on right now with this defeat to Brighton. So it's concerning, but also they're not that far off the top because every top team has stumbled a little bit so far this campaign. Arsenal and West Ham have had very strange campaigns. Arsenal have been stringing together wins, but very honestly, as a fan, defensively, Arsenal have generally looked okay. As an attacking team, they don't look quite to have clicked this season the way they did last year. Yes, they tend to control and dominate games a little bit more, but they're lacking this clinical edge that was ever present last year. So Arsenal right now sitting in second place, only 2 points off top spot, is a very healthy place to be in the league table. And I've seen fans who've gone into meltdown after the defeat to West Ham. And I can understand elements of worry coming from the fan base, but not to the extent I've been seeing at the moment. West Ham, however, have been doing very well. They've now won away to both Tottenham and Arsenal, and they're sitting in sixth place, which, let's be honest, most fans, media, and journalists in general did not see West Ham sitting as high in the table as they are after they lost their captain Declan Rice to Arsenal in the summer. It was expected that perhaps West Ham would slip a little bit, lacking Rice's leadership, but huge credit to them because they've replaced him with very good midfielders at the moment who are, well, midfielders and attackers who are carrying them to good results. They haven't necessarily had the most consistent set of results in their last few games, but they look like a force. Their attack is a threat to anybody in the league, and you cannot switch off for a second against them if you are trying to defend against West Ham. It's also a word here for David Moyes, the manager of West Ham. So far in his career, he had never managed to win away against any of the what we call traditional top four sides in England, which is Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Chelsea. Chelsea have kind of edged their way there. But with the win that he picked up in matchday 19 for the first time on his 73rd attempt, he has managed to get an away win against one of the traditional top four. So even as a fan of the team that ultimately handed him that victory, I have to congratulate him. I have always liked David Moyes as a manager, and I'm happy that at least he's finally got that chip off his shoulder. Chelsea and Crystal Palace are two sides that, again, inconsistent, but still there's a sizable gap between them. Chelsea have finally started to string together results. Their win against Crystal Palace was their second consecutive one at home, which they hope will be able to lead to a more consistent run of good results at their own home. Crystal Palace, on the other hand, are without a win in their last 8 games, stretching all the way back to the start of November right now, which is a huge concern. They need to start picking up wins because they are starting to fall further and further behind in that race to at least be safe at mid-table, but they are now not that far off from being in discussions of falling into the race at the bottom of the table, which is a race nobody wants to be in. And then there's Fulham, who are kind of an enigma on their own because if you forget the last 3 games, Fulham were one of the best scoring sides in the 4 games before that because they're those 4 games saw Fulham scoring 16 goals, and they ultimately were quite unfortunate to be on the wrong end of a 4-3 scoreline at Liverpool because they were leading that game in the last 10 minutes and then somehow contrived to lose it. But then since those 4 games, and now if we look at their last 3 games, they have lost all three and have not scored a single one. Fulham are a very weird side because they kicked off the season poorly, struggling for goals and struggling for results. Then they went on a good run of a month or so where they did start to finally find the net, where they were scoring goals. They were looking like a side that had settled into a rhythm of having many different goal scorers, which was working for a while. And then I don't know whether it's the congested fixture schedule, which has led to fatigue, or whether there's other factors at play, but they suddenly look like they're struggling for goals again. And I say this completely aware that their next opponent is Arsenal, and I would put money right now on the fact that they will find their scoring form again. But Fulham versus Arsenal is a game coming up very soon around the turn of the year with both teams struggling for goals. It will either be 0-0 or somehow I'm guessing it will be something like 3-3. You just know that's how football is going to work its magic. But the London sides in general, nobody has been exactly consistent. But you could argue West Ham and maybe Arsenal are the two sides that are the most positive right now going into the new year with all the possible changes that are coming. So very quickly, we thought we'd also just look as usual at how we did in our predictions. Honestly, on any day, 99 times out of 100, if the current Newcastle side played Forest, you would expect Newcastle to probably come out on top, especially at their own home where they're almost unbeatable, really. Um, Full credit to Forest that they somehow managed to steal a win out of that because it's a hostile environment for any visiting team. Uh, and Forest deserved it, really. They truly did. I watched the game and they turned it around after falling behind. Bournemouth, honestly, I thought that they would have a tougher time. I thought Fulham eventually needed to find that goal scoring form, and this was a game where they might be able to. But Bournemouth, full credit to them, they seem to be a side on cloud nine right now, and they don't look like coming down from that anytime soon. Hopefully, they can keep up that form for a long time because I do like Bournemouth and their manager as a side. And it's good to see them safely away at the moment from that bottom three discussion. I did think Luton versus Sheffield would be a very close game and that Luton would edge it. Um, I do think that the defensive lapses on both sides ultimately, I probably should have incorporated that into my prediction because both teams have shipped goals quite a bit. Not surprised that it ended up being a scoreline like 3-2. Both teams do definitely have defensive issues that they still need to sort out if they're hoping to be safe from going down to the championship again at the end of the season. But ultimately, I did get the right winner of this game, and I'm going to take that. I thought Liverpool would be a little more dominant in their game against Burnley, and I was surprised that they weren't. They had chances, and I'll be honest, there were some refereeing decisions that disallowed Liverpool goals, and I was very, very shocked to see those decisions made because even as a fan of a rival team and Liverpool's main rival right now in the title race, ultimately I want to see fair officiating and I want to see the same standards held for everyone. And it does feel like there are certain teams in the league that are being refereed differently from others. Man City seem to get a lot of favorable decisions. Liverpool, Wolves, Arsenal to an extent seem to be on the receiving end of very, very poor calls from the officials. I basically the overall standard of refereeing needs fixing in England, but I do think that the big thing, first of all, is to make sure the same standard is held for every side, which it definitely is not right now. Villa were doing enough to win this game. I don't quite know what happened and why they managed to take a 2-0 lead and turn it into a defeat. But credit to Manchester United for changing their tactics at halftime when they were still 2-0 down. And they came back into it, ultimately refusing to back down. And Villa, for some reason, didn't set up defensively well in the second half at all. And they deserved to lose the game based on how they played their second half. It was just shocking to witness. Honestly, Brentford at home, I keep thinking that at some point they'll revert to last season's form, where they'll become very difficult. But Wolves, I did predict them to be a little stronger here. I didn't quite predict that Brentford would completely capitulate, but again, Wolves deserve all the plaudits right now for continuing to get results despite being probably the team that has been on the receiving end of the worst refereeing mistakes so far this season. Chelsea and Palace, I did think would be a, a very, very close game, and it proved to be that way. Chelsea went ahead initially, Palace equalized, and it took until an 89th minute penalty for Chelsea to get their victory, but a narrow win it was. I did think Man City would win by 2 goals. I just didn't think that City would fall behind to Everton, which Everton were playing very well at the start of the game, but ultimately Manchester City are sheer force, and that force combined with some rather unnatural Everton mistakes is what cost them this game. I thought Spurs might be able to handle their injury situation better than Brighton, but very, very, very good tactics by Brighton. They weren't afraid. They didn't hesitate to go at Tottenham, and they deserved their win of 4 goals to 2. Actually, if we're honest, Brighton probably should have won the game 4-0. They fell asleep defensively towards the end of the game, perhaps got a little complacent, and tossed a couple of goals aside. I guess maybe they were still in the Christmas spirit and felt like gifting a couple of goals. But yeah, it was a deserved win for Brighton, and can't say anything other than that. Uh, l- the matches for Arsenal against other London sides this season have been the toughest for them for some reason. They dropped points in draws to Chelsea, to Tottenham, to Fulham, and they only barely beat Brentford, but with a late goal from Kai Havertz. So I had predicted Arsenal would drop points. I didn't quite expect that the performance would be as abject as it ended up being. Arsenal can have no complaints, really. There were some potential suspicious decisions made by officials regarding West Ham's first goal, but at the end of the day, Arsenal didn't defend the situation well. They deserved to go behind to the two goals which were conceded, and ultimately, despite all their offensive pressure, there was never anything of major substance uh, from Arsenal's attack, and they deserved to lose this game, I'll have to say. That is where we're going to leave you for today. That was our recap of Matchday 19. If you liked it, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with others who you think might be interested. And if you think there's something that maybe we missed as a key moment or something that we should be discussing for future match days, please do let us know in the comments or on our Twitter page if you happen to check that out. But we will be back very, very soon with our next video previewing match day 20 as we head into the second half of the Premier League season. For now, take care, stay safe, and remember, it's called football.